Now I would like to introduce Eric Gertler, currently President and CEO designate of Empire State Development, New York State's economic development agency. Gertler brings extensive private and public sector leadership to Empire State Development from roles including Executive Chairman of U.S. News and World Report, Managing Member of Ulysses Ventures, Executive Vice President of New York Economic Development Corporation, and Managing Director of the Center for Economic Transformation. He's going to discuss New York's $620 million initiative for investment in the life sciences and what the Endless Frontier Act could mean for New York. Welcome, Eric.
Well, great. Thank you very much for having me this morning. Can you hear me just fine?
Yes, you're great.
Great.
Perfect.
Great. You never quite know. So, well, look, it's wonderful to be here with you, and it's a privilege to be able to lead this organization in support of Governor Cuomo. And I think, as you pointed out in my bio, this is my second stint in government. My last stint, I started under Mayor Bloomberg. And I have to say that one of my main areas of focus and passion in my last government stint was in the life science area. And I had the privilege of working on Life Science Fund to help attract life science companies to New York City, as well as helping to spin out interesting innovations and technologies from the academic medical centers and help develop some of the incubators and some of the mentorship programs. So this is an area where we know it's important. We know it's an industry of the future, but it's also one in which I have great passion. So, interestingly, in March, I was supposed to attend in person a life sciences conference and give a speech, and that speech was going to be almost predominantly about all of the work that we've done in life science. The governor's, as you point out, the $620 million commitment to life sciences in New York State. And then in the speech, there was a brief mention about this recent development of a virus that was starting in China. As you might expect, that conference was canceled. And that little mention in the speech about that virus in China has become all-consuming for us in New York State, in the country, in the world. And there's no way that any of us could have predicted what would have happened, since then. And I illustrate that story because it gives you a sense. Even today we're now forced to do these speeches on Zoom, but it gives you a sense of how the world has changed, and how thankfully New York State has been a leader in the life sciences and in at the forefront of medical innovation. And I think that has helped us as a state to lead our way through this crisis. We have viewed this crisis as both a health crisis and an economic crisis, but it's been the health concerns that has led everything that we've have done over the last 8 months or so. And so what I want to do is talk about sort of some of the macro issues we faced, some of the more micro issues that we face as an agency, and then talk about the Life Science Fund and our efforts there around the state. So first of all, from a macro standpoint, we've been very fortunate to have some great assets in New York State. And I think at the top of that list has been the Wadsworth Center, which, as many of you know, is a nation-leading infectious disease testing and monitoring facility. And that has been at the epicenter of a lot of our efforts to combat the COVID crisis. And in fact, early in the crisis, the Wadsworth staff identified some problems with the CDC testing, and then developed a new test that was launched in late February that really became the first non-CDC test that was used and then approved by the FDA. And that gives you an example of how having great resources has allowed us to help to manage, help us manage the crisis, and allowed us to expand a lot of the testing that we've done in New York State. So the second thing has been the testing. As the governor talks about quite often in his press conferences, we have done more testing than anyone. And now we're up to about 100,000 tests per day. We have a positivity rate that has floated just above 1% recently. And that's been a factor of being able to understand how to do the testing and how to roll that out. And that's been a huge effort in terms of, and hugely important in terms of our abilities to combat COVID. The next thing has been lately the localizing of dealing with COVID, which has been our micro cluster initiatives, in which we can, really contain the response to small geographic areas. And that has allowed us not to close down parts of the economy, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but allowed us to laser focus on certain areas and deal with that crisis. And I think over the last few weeks, after the governor announced a number of hotspots, we've seen significant success with that. And then lastly, as we think about this as a micro level, on a macro level, we do all understand that at some point, to fully escape from the crippling effects of COVID, we need to have a vaccine program that works. And the governor has announced the COVID-19 Vaccination Administration Program. And that it has responded to the fact that there are so many unknowns about what is going on with the vaccine. Will it be effective? Will it be safe? How will it be distributed? How will it be prioritized? In the last 2 weeks, the governor has put forward an initial framework for ensuring the safe and effective distribution of any vaccine in New York State, so that people would be comfortable and confident should they take the vaccine. And that has obviously been done in partnership and discussion with public health experts, and that will, as it gets rolled out, require a lot of collaboration and prioritization. He did put forth a matrix on how it would work, but again, it just gives you a sense, without getting into certainly all the details, because we need to have a vaccine first, but it gives you a sense of how we have thought about this, and how under the governor's leadership we've had to think ahead and forward to ensure that we can manage this crisis. So in terms of an agency, as a next point, we're the leading economic development agency. We are the economic development agency for the state, and that has meant that we're the agency in charge of growing jobs, attracting businesses, helping with infrastructure projects, and that has been our focus since the beginning of our agency. When COVID hit, we had to very quickly transform and reprioritize the priorities for this agency. And so it has required us from moving away initially from thinking about jobs to thinking about how can we think about the safety of New Yorkers and support essential workers on the front line. And when I think about over the last 8 months as an agency, in every area of the work that we've done, we've had to rethink how we have done things. So, our real estate division, which has typically focused on infrastructure programs, looked at ways that we could use hotels and, for essential workers, or warehouses to maintain supplies. We've used our film and TV division to be able to provide meals for essential workers. We have been involved with through our strategic business group, which has primarily been focused on thinking about how do we attract businesses. Went and then spent months working on how do we identify supplies for essential workers. And as you remember, it just gives you a sense of the state of the world and the state of the supply chain around the world. We had to think about where could we pinpoint and identify supplies from all around the world. And then as well, our small business group, which focuses on the 98% of businesses in New York State, which are small businesses, spend time thinking about how do we get financing, how do we get federal loan programs to be able to support our small businesses. And so quickly we started to, as we've learned over the last 8 months, but as an agency dealing with it on the front line, understand how a health crisis could very quickly consume all parts of an agency. One of the important areas and priorities that the governor set for us was to think about how did we retool our economy to be better prepared for, a potential second wave, but also, life in a COVID world. And what we have done is we've sought to retool manufacturers across the state so that they can provide and be able to manufacture some of the critical supplies that we need. So over the last number of months, we have used $16 million to fund 28 companies to be able to and ensure that we have a ready supply in New York State of critical PPE supplies such as N95 masks or surgical masks, gowns, diagnostic testing. Everything from that standpoint to ensure that we don't have to go through, all the efforts that we went through last time to scour the world, that we now have a ready supply of these critical needs in New York State. And as part of that, we've also now had to focus on, rebuilding the New York State support for small businesses. I just want to point out two programs in particular. One in which we created the New York Forward Loan Fund, which was able to provide funds for small businesses to be able to get smaller loans to support their operational needs, focused primarily on MWBE businesses. And then also a program called Empire State Digital, which has allowed small businesses to start to be able to digitize their businesses in a COVID world where the digital part of the businesses has become that much more important as people spend less time actually going into stores. So as you can see, to give you a sense that an agency that's been focused on jobs and job growth has had to, like many others, transform our ways to be able to respond to the critical needs of this crisis. One of the areas that we have always identified as being critical to New York State is thinking about emerging industries, industries of the future. And there's no question that life sciences has been particularly important for New York State. We've always known that we have some of the greatest assets in the world, some of the finest academic medical centers in New York City, and then across the state, everything from Roswell Park in Buffalo, Rockefeller University in New York, University of Rochester, Cold Spring Harbor on Long Island, all of these amazing physical institutions, and then it comes down to, of course, the people. We have some of the best scientists in the world. We have some of the, we have Nobel Prize winners across the state. And then when we think about sort of the next generation, I think it's important to also understand New York ranks number 2 for generating both math and physical science degrees. Number 2 for R&D, academic R&D expenditures. We are number 3 in the US in terms of NIH funding. We're ranked 2 for states with the most first-tier research universities. Number 2 in the United States for bioscience jobs. Number 1 in the Northeast for STEM graduates. And I can, keep on going. It just gives you a sense that New York State is really well positioned to be able to continue to be a leader in life sciences. And so The critical part for us has been to think about how do we cohesively tie all these assets around the state, and be able to continue to build on the many successes that we've had. Nancy, as you pointed out at the beginning, 4 years ago, the governor announced a $620 million fund focused on life sciences, and I think that level demonstrated our commitment to a strong and innovative, but also a commercially viable sector, a life science sector statewide. And the initiative has been focused on to expand our ability to commercialize the research while growing the economy, using the capital to support companies through their growth and their R&D needs, and then to help develop research and the entrepreneurial talent to grow New York's life science sector around the state. And just for those that aren't aware, that $620 million has been divided into sort of four functional areas: $100 million for refundable life science R&D tax credits, which companies have already taken advantage of throughout New York State; $100 million for Excelsior Jobs Programs tax credits for life science, same thing; $100 million for private investment, such as what we've done with the IndieBio Accelerator. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then $320 million for capital assistance programs. And that capital assistance program is our cluster model, where we've established clusters so that we can ensure that there's direct expertise between the research and the commercialization of those life science technologies. Now, of course, money is one part of that. It's important that we ensure that we are meshing that money with the proper public-private partnerships, and it's important that people continue to understand that New York is a thriving, important place to conduct and build life science companies. One of the critical ways that we've ensured we've had strong public-private partnerships is we've used a number of our different centers that we've set up. Some of our NYSTAR centers, we've used 13 of our NYSTAR centers to ensure that we've collaborated on our life science expertise. We've used some of our centers for advanced technologies, centers of excellence, all of these to ensure that there's a collaboration between the private sector and universities so that we can leverage the entrepreneurial spirit that we have in New York, but with all of the deep research and expertise that we have within our university and academic centers. So certainly we've seen a number of productive partnerships that have developed around the state. Everything from the Empire Discovery Institute with the University of Rochester, University of Buffalo, and Roswell Park. I mentioned IndieBio, which has received $35 million to start that program, and ensuring that we're gathering some of the founders to be able to undertake an aggressive program to, with the right mentorship, to be able to build their companies here in New York. J Labs, which was one of our first investments, and then on another scale, and to give you a sense of some of the larger companies, Athenix, which started at the University of Buffalo lab, and that has spun out to raise more than $200 million, and to develop and manufacture cancer therapies. That went public about 3 years ago, and they've also announced that they've developed over 300,000 square foot space for drug manufacturing, which is one of the most up-to-date manufacturing facilities in life sciences in the country. Avanti Biosciences, preclinical biopharmaceutical company focused on in the Alzheimer's space. And then, of course, one of the partners that ESD has worked with over many years, Regeneron, which was founded over 30 years in New York State. I use those just as a few examples to give you a sense of the innovations that have occurred in New York State. We continue to build on our successes. Now more than ever, we are committed as a state to building life sciences. The presence of the current pandemic that we're going through highlights the need for doubling down on our efforts in terms of ensuring that we are developing the right types of public-private partnerships, and also highlighting that the need for public health must be a critical component, of public policy. And I think that no question that Governor Cuomo has shown that effective public health is critical, and ensuring that those initiatives are tied with the everyday needs of New Yorkers. And I think that is why, as 8 months ago, New York State had the highest rate of COVID occurrences. We've gone from the highest to one of the lowest. That's been a product of focusing on public health, ensuring that we have used health first, and then ensuring that the other policies we have follow the needs for the health of New Yorkers. With that, I'll just say that our view is that New York will continue to be an example of to the nation, the world, of a great place to invest in life sciences, one that we have great assets and the people as well to help support that. So with that, Nancy, I just want to say it's been a pleasure to talk to your audience today. I know that there's a